I seem to say this a lot, largely because I think there's a dearth of faith in Yu-Gi-Oh regarding the competitiveness of certain decks. But Six Samurai is another deck that should be doing better, capturing the occasional top 16 or top 8 at a major tournament due to its swarming capacity as well as its ability to lock opponents' strategy down. While I cannot speak directly to the fact for this lack of success, this deck build definitely has some meaningful changes from what I view as the general standard Six Samurai build. Thus, maybe this build could narrow the gap between where Six Samurais currently are and the top without having to lament about the lack of gateway, for clearly it just appears that the standard build isn't getting the job done. Starting off, due to the variety of the Six Samurai archetype, reviewing the available direct support is important, especially for understanding why some cards work and some do not. In my mind, Chamberlain really only exists to provide flavor purposes. Skip it. In the first generation of Six Samurai, Great Shogun Shien was the summoning objective due to its attacking power, protection effect, and its single spell trap use effect. The usefulness and consistency of Great Shogun was further aided with the existence of Gateway. Combining Shogun with legendary Shien is still relevant as it eliminates your opponent's ability to activate spells and traps for the most part, unless they somehow lock down Shien or Shogun's effect, because legendary Shien negates the effect but doesn't negate the activation, so the negated spell or trap is still the only spell or trap your opponent can activate in a given turn. However, in the current meta with Gateway banned, greater reliance on monster effects, and more options available to remove monsters from the field without destroying them, the usefulness of Great Shogun has diminished both in its own effect and the ability to summon it to the field. Thus, while Great Shogun is still a quality card, the problems associated with its consistency make running it questionable, at least in my eyes, so I choose not to run it. If Gateway is ever removed from the ban list, then running one Great Shogun becomes much more appealing. I probably like Shien's Chancellor more than most due to its innate special summoning and its low-cost monster destruction. However, its biggest negative is that, based on its name, it is not officially considered a Six Samurai monster. Thus, it cannot trigger or take advantage of the other cards that reference Six Samurai monsters. In the past, Enishi's principal role was field clearance through its destruction effect to kind of plow the road for the rest of the swarming Six Samurai. However, with all of the new removal and strategies, Six Samurai have kind of evolved or changed its strategy from large-scale swarming to more of a control-based deck with swarming potential. Due to this change, Enishi has kind of lost its place in a Six Samurai deck. Also, removing Six Samurai monsters from the graveyard from play for its summons can reduce the efficiency of a number of other Six Samurai cards, raising more questions to the usefulness of this card. Grandmaster of the Six Samurai is another card that has seemingly fallen out of favor with a number of Six Samurai players. The chief reason seems to be again the movement from a swarm-based strategy to a control-based strategy with legendary Shien, and the loss of Gateway. Thus, a number of players view Grandmaster as having lost its principal advantage while retaining its disadvantage as a bad top deck due to being a tribute monster if another Six Samurai is not available. However, I think most people forget that its innate special summoning ability opens the door to numerous level 7 synchro plays that can support the victory condition in this deck, as well as being a free 2100 attack point monster. Also, as a Six Samurai monster, it works with various support referencing Six Samurai monsters themselves. Based on my deck design, I think running 2 is very effective, and it has proven useful. Due to its monster destruction effect, Zanji can be useful at removing opponent threats from the field. Its protection effect saves it, while allowing the destruction of a theoretically less valuable monster. However, I'm not a fan of this one-to-one aspect for this card in that if I need direct monster-based removal, in a sense, I actually would prefer Shien's Chancellor over Zanji, because in my mind, Zanji only has one major advantage over Chancellor, and it's the fact that it has 6 samurai. The summoning issue associated with Chancellor is rarely detrimental in the context of destroying monsters. Zanji's 1-for-1, no quick play because it only works when he's attacking, not when he is attacked. Trade off, and the lack of an innate special summoning ability hurts its playability. I really actually don't like it very much. I think there are better options. If Kizan didn't have its innate special summoning ability, then I think it would be rather bad. However, it does have this effect, thus I do play 1 copy. Some may question only playing 1 versus playing 3, which seems to be fairly common in the more kind of conventional or standard 6 samurai build, but the simple reason is due to lack of deck space. In my play experience, I've found there's more advantage playing other cards over an additional 2 Kizan. Iru used to be very good through its ability to eliminate face-down threats without them flipping over, without any type of actual battle, just, hey, you're face down, I attack, you die. However, the game has largely moved away from flip effects and standard high defense point monster setting, making this effect much less valuable. I think this monster is a very good example of an effect that's still a quality effect, but it's just become a victim of changes in playstyle. Well, before he became Chancellor, Enishi was a legendary 6 samurai, and he was quite a remarkable legendary 6 samurai. I see why he became Chancellor. The soldier version of Enishi is certainly more useful than his Chancellor form, largely because of how the game has advanced. The ability to bounce a monster in an XZ world with a quick play aspect is much more valuable than destroying a monster with no quick play, as it can remove monsters with anti-destruction effects and disrupt opponent tempo. Overall, this guy is basically a level 4 Pallades that can provide huge positive synergy with legendary Shien, as Shien blocks the spell and traps, while Enishi prevents the cheap XZ plays from causing problems. While his ability to jump to 2200 attack is not hugely useful, it is still nice to have, because hey, 2200 is a larger number than 1700. Fortunately, due to 3 reinforcements of the army, you can get away with only running 1, because multiple copies can get a little cloggy early game when he doesn't have the necessary graveyard ammunition to tap into his bounce effect. Nisashi is one of those cards that has been outpaced by the current era, as double attacking is definitely useful, but double attacking with only 1400 attack is not useful. It certainly would have been nice if this monster had kind of an innate muted the A-Forces effect, referencing 6 Samurai, like I get plus 100 or plus 200 attack for each 6 Samurai with a different name on the field, to help augment its attack power in a kind of a theme-relevant manner, but it doesn't, thus it's not a good card. I can understand it not having that effect, though, because you could see it might have been a concern when Gateway was still around due to the insane swarming. Nisashi could have become like a 2000 double attacker, and that would have been fairly nasty. Shien's Advisor is probably the most perplexing card, in my opinion, with regards to the 6 Samurai family, for I think it's a fantastic tech card that almost no one runs. I think I might be the only person that I've ever seen actually run this card. Due to the lack of familiarity, let's read the effect. When this card is normal summoned, if you control a face-up 6 Samurai monster, declare 1 monster type. While this card is face-up on the field, monsters with the declared monster type cannot declare an attack or be special summoned. How many decks does Advisor shut down because they're basically homogeneous types? Burning Abyss? Check. Shadal? Check. Pendulum Magician Odd Eyes Dragon? Basically check, because without Odd Eyes and its fusions, the deck doesn't really do much. Cliffort? Check, along with many more, including other warrior decks like Satellar Knights and Heroes, because with the with what you'll see as the synchro capacity of this deck beyond Legendary Shien, this deck is not nearly as handicapped by a warrior call as a Satellar Knight or Heroes deck would be. It also hurts both Cosmos and Necros because those decks commonly only run 2 types of monsters. So take your pick. For Necros, either call Warrior or Spellcaster. For Cosmos, either call Psychic or Machine. With this card on the field, in addition to Legendary Shien, your opponent almost has really no chance of winning the duel unless they're running some typically unconventional hybrid deck that has numerous different monster types. So if this card is so good, why only run it at 1? I think the obvious problem is the card does need another 6 Samurai monster on the field, and without Advisor being a 6 Samurai monster itself, there could be some inefficiency in how normal summons are utilized. Basically, running multiples can induce some negative draws due to Advisor only having 1200 attack, which, given its effect, is more than fair because, again, it stops one type of monster from attacking, so it getting run over is not super commonplace. However, running it at 1 is not a big deal because, again, with 3 reinforcement of the army available, you definitely have a decent probability of getting it into your hand without actually having to draw it, so you can search for it when the situation is appropriate. Because they are generally run together or not at all, I'm going to talk about Mizuho and Shinai together. Both of these monsters produce significant swarming capacity due to their innate special summoning ability with each other. And the beautiful thing about that special summoning is it has not been restricted to once per turn. I.e., if you have 2 Mizuho and 1 Shinai in your hand, you can normal summon the Shinai, then you can special summon both Mizuhos. The level 3 standing of these monsters produce both benefit and detriment. The chief detriment is the rank 3 pool is rather inferior to the rank 4 pool, especially with regards to available warrior-based XZs. However, the benefit of being 3 is that these monsters are searchable via Smoke Signal, making it easier to combo play them from the hand, increasing swarming and playmaking probability. The swarming is also aided by their effects in the fact that Mizuho can tribute a 6 Samurai monster to destroy a card on the field, and when Shinai is tributed, you can add 1 6 Samurai monster in the grave to your hand other than Shinai. These cards together can produce some very nice advantage combos. Overall, based on the way I run my deck, the special summoning ability of these cards and the resultant swarming pool I feel is very important, especially for the ability to eliminate threats that already exist before you can make your legendary Shien play. Thus, I run 3 copies of Mizuho and 2 copies of Shinai, largely because Mizuho's effect is superior. Back in the day, Hand of 6 Samurai was a quality card in any 6 Samurai deck. But, as it has been for kind of a number of the first generation 6 Samurais, the change in how the game is played has caused a shift in the value of certain effects. Hand is just another casualty of this change in playstyle and basically general power creep. The loss of Gateway for Hand of 6 Samurai viability has certainly not helped as well. Keimon is not a bad card, but it is also not a good card. Its destruction effect makes it an interesting side deck card to add when facing a Pendulum deck, but really, card designers, did you have to take away its attack for destroying a face-up spell or trap? Stripping the attack from Yashi makes sense because face-downs are much more dangerous in general, but especially for a deck that likes to swarm. But Keimon should have still been able to attack, especially in the era when it was created, because really, what face-ups were threats back then? Oh no, Swords of Revealing Light. It's a little frustrating for Keimon. I think that he still gives up his attack, but I guess they felt they had to balance it with Yashi some. Speaking of Yashi, once this card was rather effective, but with so many chainable traps or those that can be activated upon its summons, either neutralizing its effect or sidestepping its effect, his effect has lost efficiency. Also, at only 1300 attack, it is kind of difficult to keep him on the field for more than 1 turn in most situations, for I'm not really sure what 6 Samurai monster you'd give up in order to keep this guy on the field with his protection effect. Therefore, overall, with no innate special summoning ability and its general attack point weakness, it seems rather just simpler to run a card like Mystic Space Typhoon instead, if you want that removal. I like to say that every archetype kind of has a runt of the litter, and not just the worst card, but a card that it's just bad. And for 6 Samurais, that card is Yuriza. This card is just bad. I'm not even sure why you'd bother running. Spirit of the 6 Samurai is a card I have always wanted to like, but because it functions as one of the old Union monsters demanding that it be on the field first, without Gateway, even with Gateway, it was inconsistent. Without Gateway, its inconsistency is so high, you just can't. It's not worth running. I mean, the draw potential is nice, especially in combination with something like Nasashi, but again, its inconsistency is just too high. Elder is almost immediately viable for 2 reasons. First, its innate special summoning ability has one of the most meaningful advantages for this deck. Basically, when times are good for 6 Samurai, they have significant field presence. Special summoning is really not that meaningful. Who cares? I've got field presence, I got exactly what I want, I'm good. When times are bad, they just got wiped out, they have nothing, your first turn. Special summoning is critically important. Second, Elder is a 6 Samurai monster. Thus, its special summoning is further enhanced. Unfortunately, Elder struggles as a top deck, or even a card of value by itself. Basically, the whole point of Elder is to use it in a Synchro or XZ capacity, and based on its level, more than likely that summons is going to be going for Legendary Shien. I run 1 copy of Elder as a backup plan to Kageki and my tech that will be seen later. Speaking of Kageki, it's a 2000 defense point monster if you need to set it, and a 1700 attack point monster unless it gets breakthrough skilled, because you're going to be summoning another 6 Samurai monster with its effect. And it also facilitates positive swarming and synchro play. It is one of the most important cards with regards to summoning Legendary Shien, which is the principal focus of this deck. You should run 3. Foot Soldier is not a bad card, but similar to a number of 6 Samurai monsters from yesteryear, it is simply not good enough for how the game has evolved. I'm a lot more forgiving to Battle Searchers than I think a lot of other people are. They've kind of got this mindset that, it has to be destroyed by battle. Well, that's just pointless. Screw any type of versatility it provides me. Oh, destroyed by battle, that never happens. No, it happens almost all the time. But in the case of Foot Soldier, its restrictions kind of kill it. For if this card allowed you to grab a level 4 or lower 6 Samurai monster, then it would probably still have enough viability to warrant consideration. But that level 3 restriction kind of kills it. So no more Foot Soldier. Kagemusha is one of the only 2 tuners for the 6 Samurai family, and is far and away the better of the 2, especially for this deck build due to the prevalence of level 3 monsters. The target magnet effect can also be useful as a small defense element if you're making a play with another 6 Samurai monster, but I really wouldn't rely on it. It doesn't come in handy that often. I mean, some people talk about these great moments where, my opponent flipped over a Fiendish Chain, I had a Legendary Shien, I had a Kagemusha on the field, and my Kagemusha's effect saved me. It's like, yeah, that's not going to happen very often. However, due to the importance of Legendary Shien for this deck, running 3 copies of Kagemusha is pretty much required to optimize your win probability. The only redeeming factor about Squire is that it's a tuner, but that is certainly not valuable enough to warrant running it, especially when there is no inherent value to being a 6 Samurai tuner. We'll get a little in on that later. Even if there were, Kagemusha would still have it beat on any meaningful level. In a lot of respects, without Gateway, even with the potential lure of Kizan's special summoning ability, combine Squire with Kizan, boom, there's my level 5. That's just way too inefficient. Squire is just bad. It just doesn't get the job done. As stated, Kagemusha is pretty much better on almost every level. Obviously, we need to run the 2 allowable copies of Legendary 6 Samurai Shien. It is definitely required for a top 6 Samurai deck. Summoning this guy is certainly the first goal of any Six Samurai deck a vast majority of the time. Free negation of one spell or trap per turn is a devastating effect, but obviously you need to make sure to combo him with something else to protect him beyond simple anti-destruction, because in the current environment, removal-based monster effects can come hard and can come fast and sometimes don't involve actual destruction. I don't run Shadow of the Six Samurai because its effect is just too lackluster relative to other available rank 4s. Also, deck space is rather tight in my extra deck. I run 9 level 3 or lower Six Samurai monsters in this deck, so 3 copies of Shien Smoke Signal is mandatory. Realistically, it should be pretty much mandatory for any Six Samurai deck that runs level 3s at probably 5 or more, I would say. Smoke Signal adds significant versatility to the deck, shrinking the deck and increasing its speed. This is one of the major advantages Six Samurais have over other warrior decks. They have access to reinforcement of the army, and they have access to Smoke Signal for almost double the speed and extra versatility. Triple Impact is one of those cards that I really want to play, but it is just not efficient enough. Outside of the activation condition, the biggest problem with this card is that it's a normal spell. Thus, it struggles to help keep a card like Legendary Shien on the field. If there were some way to search for this card beyond generic methods, then this card could be worth it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Cunning of the Six Samurai is a fine card that unfortunately just lacks a place in this deck due to the prevailing strategy. There really is not a Six Samurai monster that is critically important outside of Legendary Shien, so its trade-off recursion has little direct advantage. As a quick play spell, it can be defensive, but for the most part, Six Samurai monsters are going to be eliminated via battle or mass removal, not targeted removal outside, of course, Legendary Shien. And as stated, well, if you're going to be defensive with that card, what's the point? Overall, a generic recursion card like Call of the Haunted is typically the superior choice. If only this card had some form of secondary benefit, like add 500 attack to the summoned monster or something that would make it more attractive to run. Asceticism of the Six Samurai is one of the key cards in the standard Six Samurai build because it slightly increases the rate of special summoning Legendary Shien, largely through the combination of Kagemusha and Elder. Summon one of either Kagemusha, summon Elder, then activate Asceticism to summon the other, synchro into Shien. The problem with Asceticism is, outside of this combination, it's a lackluster card, and most of the time can be dead, because of a lack of target combinations, both in part that some of the combo pieces don't benefit this deck, so I don't run them, and the few that can work are somewhat limited in their usefulness. For example, for the standard build, outside of Elder and Kagemusha, really only Zanji and Kizan making a rank 4 play is useful. I don't run Zanji, which further hurts the playability of Asceticism. Overall, Asceticism just doesn't seem to work very well for this deck. I think it's run a lot because people are really hunting for that first turn Shien, and a first turn Legendary Shien is very valuable. However, running Asceticism, a card that's dead a larger number of times than you want a card to be dead, hurts, I think, the overall playability of the deck, and might be one of the reasons Six Samurai don't do as well as they should. Just a general note to Six Scrolls of the Samurai: if I'm going to spend 3 cards to summon one, can I at least have the option of summoning Great Shogun from the graveyard or the hand as well as the deck? Even if I was playing Great Shogun, this card costs far too much. Obviously, Gateway is banned. Moving on, if Dojo were searchable beyond generic means, then you could actually consider it. However, I just don't have enough deck space to take a chance on it when I have little control over when I get it due to the fast-moving parts associated with Six Samurai. It typically just drags the deck down at this point. What card doesn't drag the deck down? Six Samurai United. This is a staple at 3. as it's pretty much a pot of greed that takes very little effort to trigger, especially in this build. While it can be a bad top deck, smart play and deck design significantly limit its negative potential. It's been years since its release, but I'm still trying to figure out why the so-called legendary steed that the Six Samurai ride, most notably probably Shien, was created in the first place, and then why it was so pathetic. 200 attack is not nearly enough, and the battle destruction substitute effect is somewhat worthless, for even back when this card was first created, I could have just used an Axe of Despair to add an additional 800 attack over Steed and make destruction via battle even less probable. Just skip this card. The major flaw of Castle of Mist is the attack reduction only occurs when the Six Samurai monster is attacked, without any means to burn the opponent in a Six Samurai deck. This card only really has clumsy stall potential, which tends not to serve the deck very well. Temple of the Six is a better choice overall than versus something like Castle of the Mist, but in my experience, its influence on the game is not nearly strong enough to warrant running it. I will also note here that Shien's Daredevil and Six Strike Thunderblast are also not worth the time, for they really are not Six Samurai monsters or cards. Instead, they are only weakly associated with the deck through Temple of Six and Dojo. It's almost like creators wanted to create this kind of subsection of Six Samurai cards and then just kind of thought, oh no, maybe that's not a good idea, let's not do that. Because the whole thing with Bushido counters isn't nearly enough to warrant running any of the cards, in my opinion, associated with them. Double-Edged Sword is the best non-generic trap card available for Six Samurai decks, as it was created before Synchro and XZs, thus its detrimental condition of monster destruction and associated damage really has 0 bite. Now the detrimental effect is basically non-existent. However, for as good as this card is, I only run 1 copy due to deck space considerations and issues of graveyard size and competition. Backs to the Wall is an interesting high-risk, high-reward card, but especially in the day of Cowboy, most of the time the risk ends with you biting yourself in the butt. If you want a revival card, I'd stick with Double-Edged Sword, for as mentioned, its negative effects almost never actually activate. Just say no to Return of the Six Samurai, for it is the standard Call of the Haunted knockoff when Call was limited. Six Style Dual Wield is a nice card that can provide effective protection for legendary Shien, but its activation condition is too restrictive to provide the type of efficiency that I prefer for this deck. One of the big problems with this card is that outside of legendary Shien, again, there is just no Six Samurai monster that's valuable or powerful enough to solo on the field. With that said, I find it a lot easier to provide other types of protection and support to Shien than Dual Wield. Dual Wield kind of just loses its place, not because it's a bad card, it's just the card, there isn't enough development in the Six Samurai world from a standpoint of beefy, this monster can be a Ronin type monster, to actually warrant running it. Shien's scheme is alright, but its activation condition can be difficult to utilize efficiently. If this card had an effect similar to the Fortune Lady card Inherited Fortune, where the special summoning occurs during your next standby phase, then I think it would have been a lot better in my opinion. Too often the activation condition triggers too early during your opponent's turn, meaning that your newly summoned monsters, if you choose to use them, will kind of still be at risk of being removed from the field or destroyed before you can actually do anything with them. Breakthrough exclamation point does not provide anywhere near enough benefit to warrant its incredible level of inconsistency. Skip it. Swift Samurai Storm is, oh boy, this card's just horrible, especially in a gateway-less world. If the attack compounding was similar to like the A-Forces, 200 or 300 per 6 Samurai monster, then maybe it would be worthy of consideration, but as it stands, this card is actually fairly inferior to the A forces. Swift Strike Armor appears to be the card that helps manage one of the concerns about Six Samurai, especially in a gatewayless world, the lack of a consistent swarming potential. However, without the ability to search for it, unless you get it early, more than often than not, it will simply prove more detrimental than beneficial as a quasi-wasted draw. The big problem with Musakani Magitama is destruction-based effects are not a genuine threat most of the time. Instead, the threats for Six Samurai are battle with stronger monsters, effect negation, and monster effects that remove without destroying. Legendary Shien typically handles the issue of destruction-based spells and traps. Thus, Magatama is frequently just a dead card. It is sad because this card should be more useful due to its nice effect. It just isn't. Well, after that long analysis session, that closes out the direct support. To close out the monsters, I run 3 copies of TG Striker. One of the things I find lacking in a number of other Six Samurai builds, including the so-called, standard or conventional build, are other means to summon legendary Shien outside of Kagemusha. Remember that legendary Shien only requires a warrior tuner and a Six Samurai non-tuner material, not a Six Samurai tuner. Thus, TG Striker is a great card for a Six Samurai deck because it can special summon itself under Cyber Dragon conditions, thus allowing the player to use one of many of the level 3 monsters in this deck to summon legendary Shien, without hoping for a Kagemusha, Kageki in hand, or a Kagemusha or Elder on the field and Asceticism in hand. Also, as a level 2 warrior, it's searchable via reinforcement of the army. Finally, having a second set of tuners also opens up the deck to more synchro possibilities, especially level 7s in combination with TG Striker and Grandmaster. And the level 7s, when you look at them, there's some very nice level 7s that provide some top flight protection, including things like Clear Wing and Lord Zeta. So they can help legendary Shien defend the field, or you help them take down the opponent when legendary Shien is not available or appropriate for the situation, although those situations are few and far between. Some may argue against TG Striker because Six Samurai players want to go first, and its special summon effect is not applicable on the first turn. While this is true, the difference between the standard build and this build in making the first turn legendary Shien is really limited. The standard build has 2 asceticisms that unfortunately cannot be searched, as the only additional advantage towards a first turn going first legendary Shien, whereas TG Strikers greatly enhances Shien summoning on all other turns outside of the first turn going first. In my experience, TG is a better choice than asceticism for this deck if you want to have a higher overall win probability. Because asceticism's slightly better first turn, TG Striker is significantly better every turn afterwards. Finishing the spells, I run, obviously, the 3 copies of Reinforcement of the Army, and the 3 most important staples, 1 Raigeki, 1 Book of Moon, and 1 Soul Charge. Obviously, there are no dark holes in this deck because space considerations, as you want to focus more on protecting legendary Shien than clearing the field, because you can't clear your own field when you have a legendary Shien on it. For the traps, I run the 3 most important staples in 1 Torrential, 1 Bottomless, 1 Solemn Warning. Finally, because legendary Shien's effect cannot address monsters, both in their attacks and their effects, I run 1 copy of Vanity's Emptiness to keep those special summons down, and 3 copies of Fiendish Chain. Stop the monster effects, stop the attacks. The extra deck largely consists of synchro monsters and a few healthful XZs. I run 1 Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Summoning this card really isn't very difficult. 1 Hot Red, Dragon Archfiend. This spot's kind of a toss-up. I like to run something like Hot Red over something like Spark Dragon because Hot Red has the ability to get over monsters with higher attack points than 2500, which can be a problem for this deck sometimes if it doesn't go into the synchro well. I run one Crimson Blader, great card in a number of situations, fantastic card for this deck, helping to neutralize the potential of the opponent summoning a monster large enough to kill legendary Shien. I run one Yazi, it's very easy to make with Grandmaster, target immunity, 2600 attack, you can use it to typically hold the field until legendary can make an appearance. Clearwing Synchro Dragon, similar to Yazi in ease of summoning, very nice additional protection for legendary Shien for monster effects. I run Psyframe Lord Zeta. Lord Zeta and Lord Omega really should not have been generic, but because they are very effective. Lord Zeta, it's just fantastic for this deck. You want to keep a special summon monster from attacking legendary Shien? Lord Zeta's your guy. They special summon that monster in attack mode. Zeta says, alright, you and I are going to be banished. We won't see each other again until my controller's next standby phase. I run one Red Wyvern. You need a level 6 in this, and why Yugioh is always a contender. Wyvern's quick play destruction effect is very nice for keeping legendary Shien alive. They summon a higher attack point monster. You say Red Wyvern, bye, done and done. Barkion's another possibility, but legendary Shien typically can handle traps by itself. Ramadi's Keeper of the Boundaries, dealing with Shadals, dealing with Cosmos. I run one Ally of Justice Catastor, beautiful card for removing those pesky high attack point monsters. And then I run two of the 4 rank 4 staples, one Exciton Knight, one Castel. I run Castel over 101 because his bounce effect's a little more effective at bouncing back cards rather than just monsters. I run one Heroic Champion Excalibur, raw attack power, and I run one mech-equipped Engineer. It's pretty easy to make with all of the available level 3s, especially because certain level 3s can special summon themselves, and it provides additional protection for legendary Shien, especially via battle. However, it's also useful that if you find yourself in a jam, it can typically hold the field for a couple turns by itself, or at least force your opponent to use some more valuable card effects that could otherwise be used on something like legendary Shien. However, there are times where you might face a deck where you think you need more attack power. Then you can side out something like number 30 Acid Golem 2. One might wonder why I only run one rank 3 XZ when I have 9 level 3 monsters in the deck. The reason is that most of the time the level 3s are going to be either making higher synchro level plays, or they're going to be using their effects, most notably Mizuho and Shinai, to produce advantage in other ways. Also, I side Naturia Beast, because really outside of Necroz, it doesn't really do that much. It does help a little against Shadal, obviously, but really Necroz is where Naturia Beast typically shines. So, that's a side deck. I'm facing Necroz, Naturia Beast is sided in, typically for Heroic Champion. Overall, even without some of the cheapness provided by multiple gateways, 6 Samurai decks should be doing better in the modern meta due to the power of legendary Shien and just the sheer speed of this deck. You've got Smoke Signal, you've got United, you've got Reinforcement of the Army. That's speed. One of the major reasons I think 6 Samurai struggle is the deck design is too focused on legendary Shien. It's just this tunnel vision of just get legendary on the field, and the deck is designed to the point that if you don't get it on the field, you're kind of screwed. Personally, I think it's almost ridiculous in a sense when you see 6 Samurai decks running 12 to 14 monster counts, and they only run the 3 tuners in Kagemusha, despite the presence of Reinforcement of the Army and Smoke Signal. I mean, Reinforcement of the Army is a fantastic versatility tool, and you don't see many people taking advantage of that. In my experience, this deck works really well against Tier 1 decks, even when it doesn't go first, because the higher monster count gives you more flexibility and more consistency. Well, that's my 6 Samurai deck. Thank you for your attention, and your time. I'm out.